Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the office. I know it's been like 2 weeks, or maybe even more than that, but I know probably about 2 weeks. You're probably wondering what the heck happened. In a way, so am I. I'm going to tell you why you haven't heard from me. Now, your midterm was due in the middle of October, and that midterm ended up being sort of that short essay question that I gave you. So if you're wondering what the heck happened to the midterm, that is what happened to the midterm, and I thought I had explained that, but a few of you asked me about it, like two of you, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of that. In addition, we do have some assignments that we're going to talk about today, and they're simple, nothing major. But I do want to tell you what I've been doing for the past 2 weeks and why I haven't spoken to you. Now, if you are in any of my other classes, you know that I've been keeping up with you guys and gals and others. I have been, doing everything I can to stay on top of grading when I can and getting you your lectures on time. But not this class. And the question is why? So one of the things that I do when I look at my syllabus for this particular class or for Comtech and Politics in the spring is I look at it and I say, what recent things have come up that I can utilize. I also look for traditional research to sort of beef up what I'm telling you. And then, of course, I base it on my experience as well as a political communication researcher. And I've been doing that for the past couple of weeks. And as you know, we were supposed to talk about political advertising, marketing research, and polling, field work, and this thing called image versus issue, which I'll get to in a second. And the fact of the matter is that I went through everything I have. I even pulled out a giant red folder from the University of Oklahoma, which would have been circa 2000, when I took one of the at the time, one of the most published authors in political advertising at the time. And I looked through it all and I came to a conclusion that a lot of people are coming to, which is none of it works anymore. Literally everything that I have read, everything I have studied has disappeared from what we know now about political movement, political persuasion, political communication overall. What are those things that have changed and why do they matter and what would I have told you versus what I will tell you now? That's what this little video is going to be about. And does it sound like I'm throwing a lot of stuff into one video? It does, but the explanations aren't that long. They're actually quite simple. And the fact of the matter is that I'm not going to give you reading assignments that are irrelevant to you. I find that pointless. So let's start with what's changed. You might think because I'm saying like in the last couple of weeks that this has something to do with the trials and tribulations of our former President Trump, but that's not the case. It's not just about him. And you probably knew that already. That's not a hard sell for anybody, I don't think. What has changed is that the way that political talk has started to occur in Congress and in our public discourse has impacted the way that people campaign. It's impacted the way that voters make decisions. And those changes are significant enough that, as I said to somebody a year ago, we're throwing out all the models, right? One of the things that we do in academic research is we model. We try to find ways to predict what might happen. In our case, we're usually looking at how will a particular political ad be received? What messages is the audience looking for? Something along those lines. What's going to motivate people to act a particular way? All of those things are, generally speaking, what we're looking for. Let me tell you what we're not looking for, what we haven't looked for. We haven't looked for what to do when every single precedent that you know has been just blown. And again, I'm not just talking about the president here, the former president, or the president in that case. I am actually talking about Congress people as well. One of the things that I think is the most mind-blowing and yet a great metaphor for what's happening is this whole thing with John Fetterman out of Pennsylvania. John Fetterman is known for wearing very casual clothes. He doesn't like to wear suits. He's a son of a steel worker. He's from a part of Pennsylvania that's extremely blue collar, and usually you're wearing Steelers gear, and that's what he wants to do. And so one day he talked the Senate into getting rid of the requirements to wear a suit and tie. I think it's actually a jacket and tie that are required on the Senate floor, or were required on the Senate floor at the time. I apologize. My insulin pump is going a little nuts right now for some reason. So he talked them into that. And so he was showing up in his sweatpants and his hoodie. And I think a lot of us were kind of like, what is he doing? That is inappropriate, because as much as I like to say I'm a pretty casual person, and I wear jeans to teach, and my mother's mortified by that. Times do change, and therefore wardrobes change, and therefore the way we present ourselves changes. But what ended up happening was they did this for like 2 weeks. And then all of a sudden somebody's like, nope, we need to go back to wearing suits. And, it was revoked. The, what's the word I'm looking for? The dress code. There we go. The dress code was revoked. And now everybody's back to wearing suits. And to me, this is the perfect metaphor for what is happening in political communication. We did things a certain way, and then somebody came along and said, let's change the way we do it. And then the difference in the metaphor is that we never bounced back. We never went back to what we used to do. So let's look at some things that might have impacted this change. I mean, certainly there's a couple of things. The social media use, the proliferation of social media platforms is definitely an impacting factor. The fact that we are now talking about truly constitutional laws and legalities that we've never addressed before. Roe v. Wade was 1973. That's the most recent. And it was still the year before I was born. It is something that we've been working on for the past, almost 50 years. So, or no, I guess 50 years. So 50 years this year, in fact. But other constitutional questions are coming up that we have not dealt with in literally centuries, right? Like, first of all, the question of, the 14th Amendment. Which parts of those apply? Who has the power? I saw a judge today on one of the talk shows saying that is self-executing. What the bloody hell does that mean, sir? The piece of paper isn't going to tell us what to do. But that's exactly what the Constitution is supposed to do, right? It's supposed to tell us what to do. And the Supreme Court is supposed to be trustworthy enough, and I think they are, to interpret the Constitution strictly in what it intends to be. However, when you don't have challenges to these things since the day the thing was written, it gets a little hairy. Now, why do I say those things have changed political communication scholarship? First of all, the proliferation of social media is probably pretty obvious. We just have way too much going on, too many things to study, and in way too short of a time to study it. So you have to pick a channel. Truth, Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. And which one of these do you pick if you want to understand? And the answer is you need all of them to understand public discourse, because not everybody uses the same channels. Whereas before we used to use the same channels almost literally, right? There were town hall meetings, there were newspapers, magazines, radio call-in shows, and TV news shows. And those were great. And everybody thought, oh my God, that's way too many. Well, now we've proliferated out of our own ability to be able to study anything. And so I think that's had a great impact. The second thing that I talked about, which was sort of this transition from, oh, you know what, we're going to go dabble in this other form of communication for a little while, throw insults at each other, allow each other to be criminals in the public sphere, and then we're going to try to come back to where we were, and that just doesn't happen. Who are some of those people that I'm talking about? Because the president, that's separate most of the time. The executive branch is not necessarily that representative, right? Because we know that at least half the people are unhappy at any given time with whoever's in office. That's a given. However, what is it that happens when our representatives in Congress start to do things like fraudulently accept money or wire fraud, which, by the way, is what they got Capone on. And I believe it was Tom Cruise who said in the movie The Firm, it ain't sexy, but it's got teeth. That's how you get people, is with the money. You've always got to follow the money. So George Santos he's in it. He's in deep. And you'll notice that both Republicans and Democrats voted to keep him in office. And I was like, what the hell are we doing? Why would we do that? This guy is clearly guilty of a lot of things. I don't even know what. But the answer to that is actually very good, which is, in order to really remove somebody from Congress, you really should go through the steps of due process. And one of those is the Ethics Commission. And all of a sudden I found myself reading Ethics Commission law. And I'm like, why am I reading this? And the answer is because that's the only way for me to understand why my representatives, why people that are in Congress would vote to keep this person in office. And the answer very simply is there is a due process. It should be followed. Now, I happen to agree with that. As much as I hate to say that I agree with the talking heads who are saying it, they're right. And I think it's important to remember that. On the other side of that, there's a Democrat, a senator from New Jersey, who is hiding gold bars in his bed and who has been charged with being an agent of Egypt. That's a problem. Due process, okay. Now, we all know that the justice system is incredibly slow, right? It's incredibly slow. But which would we rather have? People just throwing other people out, or a due process that protects everyone, including us? And normally the answer is everyone, including us. However, I would like to point out that for 12 minutes now, I've been talking about everything but political communication. We're not talking about messaging. I'm not talking about advertisements. I'm not talking about gender. I'm not talking about storytelling. I'm not talking about any of that. Why? Because our political communication discourse, our political discourse, has shifted a great deal. We are now doing things like, I don't know, charging people in public with things that they did wrong. We are doxing, as you kids call it, doxing people who are just, your average American citizen. We are spending so much time trying to figure out the legalities of whether or not our federal representatives and senators and president should be allowed to stay in office or run for office. And that debate is long and it is difficult, and it is usually left up to the lawmakers, not to us. But now it's come down to us, and that is what impacts our political communication. So one of the things that I was reading, I'm going to just throw out names. I'm going to name drop for a while. I don't think you necessarily need to know these names, but just to impress you, I have no notes down here either. I keep looking at my phone. No notes, I promise, and I will only be looking at your syllabus. Because I want to start off with where we left off, and I believe that was political advertising. So I start looking at political advertising literature, right? And I've written some of my own, obviously, that's a given, because political communication is the thing that we research the most, political advertising, excuse me. Why? Because it's easy. Political ads are short, sweet, to the point. Okay, not always sweet. There's a lot of mudslinging going on. And it used to be that we would look at it for civility. We would look at it for ethics. We would look at what messages work better than others. I can tell you a couple of things that was my husband, by the way. I'm texting him now. He's upstairs. That's real helpful. So a couple of things that we do know about political advertising is that there's what we call positive ads and negative ads. Aren't hard, that's not hard to define, although apparently we spent like 10 years in the field trying to define it for some weird reason. Positive and negative ads, one thing we found is that people like positive ads, but learn more and are more persuaded by negative ads. Yay! Okay, that's great information. So excited about that information. At the time, that was incredible information to have because it was, well, right around about 1984 when Linda Lee Cade and Bill Benoit were writing about political advertising. And they sort of both came at it from a different perspective. And now I'm going to brag for 1 second and tell you that I had the absolute pleasure of being their student, both of them, at different times, one at Oklahoma and one at Mizzou. And they both happened to be the most published scholars at that time on political advertising. They each came up with a different mode or model for looking at political advertising. Linda Lee Cade's was mainly video style, something called video style. And for Bill Benoit, it was something called the functional approach. And the functional approach essentially said, hey, look, does the advertisement, is it acclaiming something positive? Is it criticizing the other person, attacking them? Or is it a rebuttal? Like, are they responding to something? And all political communication, he says, all political ads at least, fall into one of those three categories. He later extended this to political cartoons, political pins that you wear, political headlines, and found that it was always the same. There are many more attacks than there are acclaims or defenses. There's pretty much no defenses at all whatsoever, or rebuttals. And acclaiming is often done by the candidate themselves, whereas attacks are done by third-party sponsors of political ads. None of that is shocking because it's obvious now. However, back then, this was good new information and gave us a way to look at political advertising. Well, now that advertising no longer occurs just on television and just on radio, now we've got to be concerned with how are we going to go about studying this on all the platforms. Now, Instagram functions differently than the others, right? Because it's pictures mostly. That would be true for TikTok. That would be true for, did I say Pinterest? I meant Instagram, if I didn't say Instagram. Instagram, they function a little bit differently. Facebook has both. Like you could write like a 200-word paragraph and put pictures. Twitter is supposed to be shorter, although we link videos and pictures now all the time. But for the most part, they are functionally different in the medium of communication. And we all know, hopefully you've learned from Marshall McLuhan, that the medium does in fact change the message. It dictates the message sometimes. So it's really important to try to understand what the medium is doing to the message. And when we have this proliferation, I can speak, the proliferation of social media platforms, we also have a proliferation in the amount of study that needs to be done. So already starting in about 2010, we were behind the eight ball, as we say, or behind the curve, whichever metaphor you want to use. We were not able to catch up. So people sort of put that away and said, okay, well, let's start studying other things. So I was like, okay, marketing research, definitely a lot more current, right? Because on Facebook and all these other platforms, one of the things you do have is a captive audience for targeted, extremely well targeted advertising from marketing campaigns. However, they have to be so quick that, you could catch them in between a TikTok video or off to the side when you're looking at Instagram or Facebook. How do you guarantee people are going to look at that? How are you going to make sure that you get their attention? And the answer is we have no idea, okay? The other thing that I was going to talk about was this concept of image over issue. And this at one time was a debate as well. The content of the political advertisement or the political speech, was it about the character of the person? Was it about who they were? Is it an image thing? Or is it about an issue? And you know what? We used to sit there and go, this is image, this is issue, this is image, this is issue. And I said way back in 2000 when Al Gore was on the debate stage and had made some comment like that he supported capital punishment, there were a bunch of other people of my thinking at the time who were like, oh, did he just say that? Oh my God, I didn't know Al Gore was for capital punishment. Now, most of us who have been in politics for a while, we know for a fact that all politicians are pro capital punishment. You're not going to say otherwise. Why? It's majority, that it's believed that it somehow would actually solve crime, for example. And so what we end up with, instead of, people being shocked that there was a candidate who was for capital punishment because we thought they weren't, is ridiculous. Because of course we never thought that. But some people did. Some people thought Al Gore was so, and I watched this happen in front of me. I saw all these people get shocked. And it wasn't because he was for capital punishment. It was because they thought he was against it. And he turned out to be for it. And they felt that that was like a lie, or that they were misled in some way. I'm not saying this is why he lost the election, by the way. That's different. But it is absolutely true that some people suddenly were looking at George Bush a little bit differently, George W. Bush at the time. So image and issue, again, don't become a thing. They're not a thing. Is that how do we still say that? That's not a thing, because that's what I feel like I'm saying a lot lately. So marketing research and polling starts to really overcome everything else. And our discourse starts to center around polling, starts to center around those marketing ideas more than they do the political. So what impact has that had? And this is, again, where things get messy. I know that's not a surprise. And I wish I had answers for you for how we could figure these things out. But honestly, the field has not figured this out yet, okay? I mean, literally, every colleague I have, all of us are struggling to figure out how to talk about politics without it, in a way that is academic as opposed to personal. Because there is a part of politics that is academic. At least there used to be. But again, unlike the Senate, we may not be going back to wearing suits. In other words, we may not have those formulas anymore until somebody comes up with different formulas. And that's sort of why we have the problem that we have now. So what can we do about it? / what can I tell you that is true? So there's a couple of things. Out of all of the things that I just said in the last 24 minutes, out of all of that, I can tell you that the following things are still true. Attacks and negative messaging still work better than anything else. Period. End of story. That's still true. We know that to be true. That has never actually shifted, really. And there would be no reason for it to shift. There's no impact that needs to shift it. Okay? There's no reason to shift something like that. It just doesn't really matter. It's what people want. We say that we don't like it, but the truth is every bit of research has shown us that people learn more from negative messaging than they do from positive messaging. So, let's take a local state election. So Lucas Kunce and Josh Hawley. I could stand up there and reiterate to you exactly everything Josh Hawley has done that's good. It might be difficult for me, but I'll find them. I can find them because factually they've got to exist. And you will listen to it and go, okay, she likes Josh Hawley. I should vote for Hawley. Move on. But if I'm Lucas Kunce and I get up and I start talking really like negatively about Josh Hawley. Here's all the things he did wrong. You're going to listen. And the reason you're going to listen is because you want to determine if you're being told the truth or if you're just being lied to by the whatever media that you're exposed to. We tend to want to know the truth. And if I'm standing up for myself and acclaiming my work, that's far less believable than if somebody else stands up and acclaims my work. And it's far less believable than if somebody stands up and tells you everything I've done wrong. For some reason, when people do things wrong, we want evidence to support that, which of course makes sense. Our court system works that way, right? We can't just convict Donald Trump. The former president has rights, right? The former president has the right to all the due process that he's going through. We don't have the right to just say, clearly you're guilty. What we should have the right to say is, I don't want to vote for you. Well, if he's not in the election, I can't tell you that. So it's interesting because a lot of people find themselves in a dilemma. Should we let Donald Trump be on the ballot in New Mexico? Is it New Mexico, Arizona, wherever they're determining it right now? Colorado? Should we allow that to happen? And it's hard not to just go, well, I don't want him to be president, so sure, let's keep him off the ballot. But there's other people like myself who, and full disclosure, I did not vote for the man and I wouldn't vote for him. But if he's going to be the person representing the Republican Party, then so be it. Give me the chance to vote not for him, right? To vote no, or to vote Biden, or to vote Vivek, or whoever my other alternative is going to be, right? And so it's hard because we don't want the guy or lady that we don't want to win. But does that mean we don't want them on the ballot? That becomes an even bigger question. Because all of this stuff that I've been talking about for the past 27 minutes, all of it falls under the umbrella of one thing, and that's a democratic government. We're assuming that we still live in a democracy, which leads me to another topic I just hate. I hate it with a fiery passion, but I'm going to say it anyway, because I've got people here in Nixa throwing this in my face left and right every single day. I'm sure you've heard it too. We do not live in a democracy. We live in a republic. Okay, people, let's go back to general political theory for just one moment. I apologize to all of us who study communication, not political science, but apparently this is something we need to know. So a republic is a representative democracy. Okay? In the Greek democracy, it was considered to be more direct because they had more of a House of Representatives-like system. The Romans were considered a republic and less direct, but they had a Senate-like system. In other words, how many people are in the House of Representatives? Anybody? 435. I don't know why I expected somebody to answer that question. Of course you can't. That's a lot of people versus the 100 that are in the Senate. So you see, they're both representative democracies. It's just that one has fewer than the other. Now, what's funny about it is that if you look at just the executive branch, then yeah, we've got not a democracy, except that they're elected by the people and they are our representative, which is true for all of the state and United States senators and representatives as well. And so what's the difference between a democracy and a republic? Nothing. In fact, if you listen to your Hamilton, which hopefully you did, they talked about being Democratic Republicans because Democratic and Republic here aren't capital R's, they're little r's. We're not talking about a political position. We're not talking about conservatism or liberalism or whatever. We're talking about a form of government. So whenever people say to me, but we live in a republic, not a democracy, which by the way, just so you know, one of your state representatives is the one who said that to me recently. And I stood there with my mouth like this. And I went, okay. And my eyes widened and I backed away and avoided eye contact for the rest of the night. I mean, really? And here's a bigger question that I ask people who say, well, we live in a republic, not in a democracy. Okay, so what's the difference between a republic and a democracy? Explain that to me. And they can't, because there isn't one. It might be in the fact that we have two houses instead of one. Like Parliament, for example, is one house, right? We're bicameral. We have two, the Senate and the House of Representatives. That's part of what makes us a democracy, which in our case is a representative democracy, thereby making it a republic, which is all the same thing. So I hope you understand my frustration with getting asked that question a lot. And if you want to discuss that, we can. But my question is always going to be, what's the implication? Whether if somebody says to me, we live in a republic, not a democracy. Okay, is that an argument? Are you trying to make a point? If so, what is the point? And they always get caught on that one because, again, there's not really functionally a difference between those two. And so it's sort of silly to have that argument. But I did want to let you know that there are macro debates going on now. Remember in the beginning of this discussion, I wish it was a discussion. I miss having people in class not doing this anymore. There's a lot of, earlier I said that we're talking about democracy. We're talking about the Constitution. And we're going way back to literally the piece of paper which was written. We are no longer talking about individual issues. I think it was Nancy Pelosi who, say what you will about her, and believe me, with every political actor in the past 250 years, I can tell you a complaint. I can tell you a complaint about every single one of them. Even the revered, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, even the revered Dianne Feinstein, John McCain, Ronald Reagan, all of these people who were considered political greats. I can tell you at least a couple of complaints I would have about them. So I don't really care what your feelings are about the person, but them as a political actor is more important if we're talking about political communication. Nancy Pelosi was on a talk show the other day and she was saying, I'm afraid because we really are at a tipping point of deciding between democracy and an autocracy, which, by the way, is not Hitler, just so we all know. An autocracy means that we're ruled by one as opposed to ruled by the many. Once we are ruled by one, there's no longer a need for us to even have a discussion about political communication. That becomes irrelevant. So now our study of political communication has moved from issues and image and character into, are we still in a democracy? Will we still be in a democracy in a year and a half? My answer to that generally is pretty much, yeah, we will. Because I think it would take a lot more than just one person to completely shut down two houses and a Supreme Court. But people are afraid of that, or they're all for it. I've met both. So I'm not really sure. But that macro discussion is where our political discourse is right now. So I could tell you, I've written a number of articles about women versus men, gender identity in politics. My dissertation was generational differences in political talk. I could tell you about Linda Cade's research. I could tell you about Bill Benoit's research. I could talk to you about Carlin Kors Campbell's research, and none of it will matter. Not right now, at least. And probably not for a long time. So here's what we're going to do. You guys have something called an explication coming up. and I am going to give that assignment. When is it due is probably going to be your first question. And the answer to that question is that it will not be due, let's see, we're on November 5th, 6th? November 6th. It will not be due until November, let's see. I believe it's the 18th, which is a Monday. No, I lied. 18th is a Sunday or a Saturday. Never mind. November 20th. So this will be due on November 20th by 11:59 p.m. I am going to write up the instructions for you. And I want to make sure that I type those up so that it's very, very clear. It's going to be a short assignment. It's not going to break you. It's not something you have to work on over Thanksgiving break because it's not going to take you 2 weeks. But it will require you to do some research. It will require you to understand some current events that are going on. And you might be asking yourself, what is an explication? Well, an explication is sort of a cross between a demonstration and an explanation. And so you don't just tell me what research says or tell me a narrative, but you give me both research and examples. So other people's research and then an example from current events. That would be kind of how I would look at it. So I'll be putting that up for you sometime today, and you'll have it. And as far as the schedule is concerned or points are concerned, I believe I said that there will be a number of discussion boards. We've been doing those. That's not a problem. You've done the short essay. We've done one of the exams already. We're going to do the explication, and then the annotated bibliography is super easy. So I will be giving that explanation to you. Maybe I'll give you both the explication and the annotated bibliography just so you have it. It's not like it's going to take you, a month and a half to do it. That's silly, but at least you'll have them so that you can think about them. There will be at least one more discussion board assignment, if not two. And this is over the next 6 weeks. So we're not in any rush. We're doing just fine. If you have any questions about the fact that I have very little to tell you that's useful right now, I understand that and feel free to send it to me. What I am excited to talk about, though, going forward is going to be speech writing. I will talk about gender a little bit because it's a thing I do. And then, of course, digital media. And you'll notice that in week 16, I have already written the question, a new political communication question mark. I'm going to need you all to put your thinking caps on for that week. We're really going to dig into what kinds of questions can we start asking about our political communication. In the meantime, I hope that this helps explain where I've been. I don't know where you all have been. I've been in front of my TV, and I don't have cable, so I have to use YouTube, and I'm looking at little snippets that I get. And sometimes it's hard to pull yourself out of those sorts of things when you're watching them. My husband said to me the other day, he's like, "Oh, thank God for true crime." And I said, "Why?" He goes, "Because otherwise all you'd watch is politics." And he's not wrong. I watch the Brian Kohlberger things and the Delphi murders and things like that. That's my palate cleanser for politics, which may say more about me than anything else. Anyway, if you have questions, comments, concerns, complaints, or threats, as always, send them my way, and look for those 2 assignments to be put up today. And, I'll see you guys back here next week.